So I'm going to add these two words here, and welcome back. This is the lessons on style. Write powerfully and beautifully, or write powerful and beautiful sentences. Okay, it's brought to you by Master Edit. You can check the link on the right there for Master Edit. It's awesome software. I like it. Seriously, it's like having your own editor, but better. It's just really awesome software. You can test drive it for free, so that's awesome. And it's really cheap. You don't have to pay a yearly fee like you do with AutoCrit, which is really lame. Now, if we have this who was, it doesn't need to be there, right? Because look you can read it without it, obviously, because that's how it is in the actual book. But it's easy to write, when you're writing subordination, to use words like who. And we went through this, and I showed how to do it. Look for two things that are repeated, and then, use who, or use which or where. And then after you do that, though, and if you get used to using who and which and where and that in your first draft, then you can go through in your second draft and get rid of them, or get rid of a lot of them by simply just erasing them a lot of times like this. And then the sentence reads well, so there you go. Okay, let's go down here to here we go. This sentence here, you want to get used to writing sentences like this. Actually, I'm going to change this color to yellow. Okay, so you want to get used to writing sentences like this. "17 years since he had ridden last down this road, going off, not to ceremony, but to real war in the province of Boeotia's train." The part that you want to get used to doing is the not and but. Going off, not to ceremony, but to real war. It's just cool. And it's not the way we usually think about things. So you probably won't naturally write sentences like that. You're going to have to do it most likely on your edit. So when you're going through your final edit, because you don't want your second edit. I don't know. I keep saying like second edit where you want to go through and change sentences. You want to change that for like your pretty much your last edit. Your second pass, you want to go through and look for story plot holes and adding information, adding thoughts, adding description, things like that, fixing up the story, and erasing stuff that doesn't need to be there. That just slows it down and gets sidetracked. And then once you have it, down after that, and pretty much everything is done, then as your last edit, you do sentence structure. Because why go through and do all this sentence structure and all this thinking when you might be erasing a lot of it, whatever. So, okay, just want to get that out of the way. So you probably won't use these kinds of sentences on the first, unless you train your brain to think like this. You probably won't use them on the first draft. But anyway, you just want to pay attention to times where you can say not or but, these types of constructions. They come in handy. And places to look for it where you might be able to use it is when you have like the word and. So let's say this had been written, going off to real war and not ceremony. So look for like and not and things like that. Look for anywhere where you have like a negative in your sentence and the word and. That's probably where you can then switch it around, where you can say going off not to ceremony but real war. And so you just flip the going off to real war, not ceremony. So you're flipping that around to be not to a not but thing. So and not becomes not but. And I'm almost thinking the person that I should go look at the actual book, because whoever turned this into a book looks like they messed up, because this isn't a sentence. This is like incomplete. So I bet it started out with it had been or something 17 years since, because as it is, she does write a lot of incomplete sentences, but that just seems strange. So another example of how you can subordinate, besides the examples we've already gone through, which is using words of time, like when and before and after. So if you have like two actions, you have two sentences, and let's say you connected it with and or something, or you just had two separate sentences, but you're like, dang, I have too many little sentences in a row or something like that upon your last edit, and you're doing the final touches. One way to change it is just if one action is not as important as the other, and one happens before the other, after the other, then you can use the word before or when or after. When they came, blah 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 blah, then they did blah 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 blah. But another way is using words like although or though, because, to make subordinate clauses. And here's an example. Although bitter, and Dean Koontz uses although and though a lot, and even uses however kind of often. Although bitter, actually first let's look at it as if it were two different sentences. He was bitter to be riding a gelding and not a finer warhorse. Period. He'd been just as glossy-haired and young and arrogant and vain in his dress as the fine young animals up there staring down at him. Let's say that's how it was originally written. It's like, okay, we have two sentences here. How can we combine them using subordination? And so when you look for when you're going through your editing process, you want to find places where you could subordinate using something like although or because. You want to find things that are kind of causal or that are related in a similar kind of way. And these are related in that kind of way. That is, he was bitter to be riding a gelding and not a fine warhorse. He'd been just as glossy-haired and young and arrogant. So, even though he's like, even though this is true. So you kind of look for those types of sentences where, where you could have said even though at the end of one of them. And then you can just change it up here to although in the front of the sentence. So although bitter to be riding a gelding and not a fine warhorse, he'd been just as glossy-haired and young and arrogant and vain of his dress as the fine young animals up there staring down at him today. Oops, I meant staring down at him. I didn't mean to say today. And just another example where, it's easy to combine two sentences into one sentence. Let's suppose the two sentences we had here was, Khazaril smiled back up at the soldier brothers. One sentence, period. He was fully aware of what hollowed out purses lay, and then so forth. So then when you have he was, you can think, well, he was fully aware. What if I just got rid of he was? Think of ways that you can combine sentences like that. So then it can be Khazaril smiled back up at the soldier brothers, fully aware of what. So, you can just look for examples where it's easy to combine sentences by just removing the beginning of one of them. Here's yet another way to do subordination, starting a sentence with if. And she actually does two in a row at the beginning of paragraphs here. If the young soldier brother had had more wits about him, he might well have unraveled this mockery, and Sazaril, the seeming peasant, drawn a well-earned horsewhip across his face. The other example, if the banner bearer was too proud to scramble the mud, Sazaril was much too tired to. So when you're going through the editing process, you probably won't write if sentences all that often naturally, unless you just happen to think that way, in which case you might have to go and edit some of them out. But if you're the kind of person that doesn't write them that often naturally, then when you're going through your final editing stages, looking at sentences you can combine, you can look at two sentences and say, can I use an if clause? That is one thing, are these two sentences related in such a way that one thing is happening because of something else, or that is like if he had done that type of thing, would this would happen? Or as you're editing and you see two sentences that are together, let's say the two original sentences was, one sentence here without if and another sentence here, and you had two sentences starting like that, and you wanted to change it up a little bit, add some variety to the paragraph. You can just then make up an if sentence by adding some piece of information that makes sense to what you already have. Okay, so that finishes this up, and I might add more videos to this series, but for now I think I'm going to keep it there, and then I'll probably will end up adding more to it, but for now this is good.
Again, please check out the Master Edit software. I'm telling you, it's awesome. I'm going to be making some videos showing you how to use it and everything, what all that can do. It's really cool. So check it out.